think we're ready. We just have to adjust the sound quickly. And we have the radio in case we need to talk to Jan. It'll sound a little bit weird because Jan's sound is coming from there. Alright, let's talk about a few things. Just to explain again, we're not always going to stop and talk like this. It's just an occasion we might do so, depending on maybe if it's raining tomorrow morning or the next few days. There's lots of rain predicted over the weekend. We'll do some of the things again just from camp. And also the reason we're not going into infrared drive, if you've maybe just joined us, is we've got a monitor problem, so it means that we won't be able to see what's going on, and it'll make it obviously quite impossible to do it. So we're going to fix that tonight. It shouldn't be a problem by tomorrow evening. But just for the moment, rather than heading back to camp, we'll just sort of run through some of those questions. A bunch of them has come through, and Jan's going to start asking away, and actually you're going to ask away, and Jan's just going to pass it on for us. Thanks, Jan, and we're listening to you. I'm not going to look down at him, it just looks a bit weird when I listen to him from down there. Cool, let's go.
Okay, Peter, the first one is from Sandy Isna, and she is asking that how does one know when termites are looking for a mate? You said that earlier, she just wants to know how does one know when they're looking for a mate?
Sandy, it's an interesting question. Termites, I have to admit, is one of those things that I should probably go and read up more on. Over time I've picked up bits and pieces of knowledge from people that know more about them and from looking at them. But in terms of how they find mates, is they literally just thousands, not thousands, millions, probably even billions of them fly off into the night. Under certain circumstances, tonight would be very good conditions for it because it's rained a lot. And some would be males and some would be females, and they would just find each other by going to light sources, obviously, that would be one way. But more specifically, just by landing in certain areas, on roads, often open sandy areas, would be good for them to find, and then they would find each other by walking around, the same as other animals would do it, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm explaining it maybe a bit odd. And then they would find each other and they would mate, and then dig the hole from there. Obviously, in that process, many millions of them get eaten, or thousands of them, by predators. Some of them maybe don't find a mate. Sometimes, just a while back, he was on their farm and he was looking at exactly this kind of scenario. And some of them were just walking around all by themselves, all lost and lonely, and others found mates. So it's a bit of a random thing, but how it works for the species in general is literally just by chucking millions and millions of animals or little termites at this. Now, a statistic I've mentioned a few times before that I find is really interesting is that the estimates, according to research, is that all the termites in the world, just termites, combined their weight, they would outweigh all the humans in the world. So again, maybe we'll get James to do the math on this, or Graham. But so that means if you took about 6 billion odd people at let's say 50 kilograms on average, you're looking at 60 billion, 300 billion kilograms of humans. Is that right? Which is a lot of tons. And then if you took all the termites, which weigh very little, you would have more termites in terms of weight than humans. So just by breeding in that sense and sending out lots of them, should work out for them. I hope that answers your question, Sandy. Thank you. You did come up with some nice questions, and let's see what's next.
Peter, the next question is from Amanda. Could you synchronize their birth like the Impala do?
Amanda just asking about the birth of kudu in this case specifically, whether they synchronize their birth to the extent that impalas do. Amanda, not quite to that same extent, and I'm going to say kudu, but also let's just say larger antelopes in general. So impalas in this case, and you can maybe compare that to springbuck in some other parts, in the more arid parts of southern Africa. They are antelopes that live in very large herds, and they move in large formations, and they can synchronize birth to a large extent because they live in those big herds. Females will go into estrus in a relatively short space of time, and the males will mate to them all in that time. So it means that 6 months later, or 6.5 months later in the case of impala, it's quite easy or logical in a way that they have all those young very close to them. The larger antelope species, things like kudu, or let's say waterbuck for that case, they don't live in such large herds, and for that reason it's not that easy for specific groups to synchronize it that much. So I'm rambling on a bit, but to try and make sense of that. So impalas might have their young over about a 2-month period, 2 months. But we sense it as a very sudden appearance of young ones, because you drive up to one herd and they might all have had their young ones in the space of a few days. Whereas with kudu, it's lots of little herds all around, and you don't see it so visual as that. But they're also young a bit more spread out. With kudu, you could find the calf born any time of the year, but the majority of them would be born in summer, and normally a little bit later into summer. So the mating season is again May, June or so. The gestation is about 8.5 months for your larger antelope. Again, you can put waterbuck and kudu and nyala almost into that category as well, and they have their young a little bit later into summer. But it's not quite as synchronized, if you want, as it is with impala or your other herd animals. Again, for that matter, if you look at eland, for instance, they're very large. They're the world's largest antelope. They have the young in a relatively close space of time per herd. Now, I've seen herds of eland of 300-400 eland where they've maybe got 150-200 calves, and all of them are about the same size. But they are large herd animals. The same happens for wildebeest, for that matter. So, man, I hope that answers your question, and I'm sure Jan knows to throw the next one at us. Still getting used to this process.
I've got a question from MG, and the question is, what are the differences between white and black rhino?
MG, I'm going to keep that question quite short, because at some stage, hopefully when we see rhino, we'll get into it more again. I presume it's your initials, MG. White and black rhino, the main difference is their habitat. White rhinos are grazers, black rhinos are browsers. Because of that, there's a lot of physical differences. White rhinos have got big wide mouths, black rhinos have got little hook lips. Because white rhinos work like lawnmowers, they walk along and they eat lots of grass. Black rhinos have to put little twigs into their mouth. So the physical difference is lots of them. Maybe at some stage when we out again, white rhinos are much bigger and the lip size is very different. You can also call them, to be maybe more technically correct, a square-lipped rhino in the case of a white rhino, or a hook-lipped rhino in the case of a black rhino. But in terms of physical color, there's no difference. Yeah?
A question from Segresta. I don't know if I pronounced that right. But she says that she saw a program with giraffes in the desert, walking in the desert. She wants to know, how can they survive in those harsh conditions?
Okay, that question, I didn't quite catch the name of the fans. Sorry if we don't get the name right. But it's about giraffe, and you saw a program with them moving around in the desert. Now I presume it was probably, I would guess, maybe Namibia, maybe Etosha, or northwestern Namibia, maybe parts of Botswana, and the film footage would have been shot maybe in a very deserty part of that environment. So let's say, for that matter, northern Namibia, northwestern Namibia, just because it's an area I'm quite familiar with. It's very arid, and you'll have big riverbeds, and they will have a lot of trees in them, so giraffes will be able to get food there to survive on it. But if they move from one area to the next, they cross through sand deserts or rock deserts where there might be no trees for quite a distance. So if they film them in that, obviously it's very, very spectacular, and it's a very striking image, the same as if you've ever seen footage maybe of elephants walking along in the desert. But it's not so much that there's food there for them, and if they walk enough, if they walk 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers or 12 miles or 8 miles or whatever, they're going to get to an area where there is food again for them. So if there were no trees whatsoever, let's say if you put a giraffe in the middle of the Sahara Desert, they obviously won't survive there. But a lot of these desert areas, same goes for Harare in Botswana and sort of central north South Africa, other parts as well where it's very desert-like. If they move around enough, they know where they can find water and where they can find food.